I'll tell you what I will do this week. There's actually two pieces I would like to do. If you take a look at the first piece, it doesn't look like it's like the rest of the Svarim because it hasn't been printed yet. This is a piece that Reb Yaakov Kamenetsky found after he published the Nevi'im and Ksuvim. There's a fellow in Toronto by the name of Reb David Palm. Okay, he is the son of Reb Avram HaKohen Palm, Zchorno Livracha. Reb Palm had three children. He's not alive anymore, Reb Palm, but he had three children. One is Aaron, the other one is David, and the other one's Usher. Okay, so I remember them. I was younger than they are. He's probably, I would say, I don't know, close to 80, or maybe he's 80 already. Anyway, so he studied in Torvadas when Reb Yaakov was still the Rosh Yeshiva of Torvadas, a good few years before he retired. And he has a notebook, which I've never seen. I only saw a couple of pages from the notebook, but he has a notebook or a pad where he wrote things he heard from Reb Yaakov. It was like a separate pad. Just to give you a little bit of background, Rav Palm was a tremendous human being. More than anything else, a tremendous human being, a tremendous tzaddik. I would say a tzaddik yisod olam. I once asked a very great tzaddik. His name was Reb Moshe Shiskow. He was a son-in-law of Reb Moshe Feinstein. He died at age 52. So that's why he didn't become one of the Gedolei Hadar. He would have been one of the Gedolei Hadar, but he died at age 52. And I once asked him, he was a tremendous tzaddik, tremendous Talmud Chacham. I once asked him, what did he think of Rav Palm? So he said, Rav Palm is a Malach Hashem Tzvakos. That's what he said. Rav Palm is a Malach Hashem. So all three of his children, Baruch Hashem, are in Chinuch. They're probably retired already. I think he's a Rav in Toronto still, Reb David Palm. And Reb Palm himself studied in Slobodka in the Yeshiva Ketana. And then his father went off to America. So his father was a Rebbe in a yeshiva, if I'm not mistaken, in Chaim Berlin. He was a Rebbe when it first opened. I think maybe even before Rav Hutner came to Chaim Berlin. And Rav Palm went to Chaim Berlin, and then he went on to learn in Torvadas. And then he became a Rebbe in Torvadas, and eventually became the head of Torvadas many years after Reb Yaakov passed away. And Reb Yaakov, we were once talking about Rav Palm, and Reb Yaakov said to me, I want to take a little bit of credit for Rav Palm because he was my Shabbos bacher in Slobodka. When I was married, learning in Slobodka in the Kovna Kollel, he used to come to me for Shabbos. So I'd like to take some credit. I said, so if Reb Yaakov wanted to take credit for Rav Palm, you can imagine who he was. But I mean, I know, he lived in my neighborhood where my father was a Rav in the same neighborhood. So we knew him quite well. And I like to say that Rav Palm became exactly what God wanted him to become. What do I mean? I studied under Rav Palm for about a year. I don't think he was a genius, but he used his time. He was very bright. There's no question. He graduated City College of Mathematics. So he had college as well in mathematics. He was a bright guy, but he wasn't, I wouldn't call him a genius, but he exactly became a sholem exactly the way God wanted. He achieved shleimus like every gadol that you know, and probably more than many gadolim that you know, right? They could be bigger Talmidei Chachamim or bigger Lamdanim. Not that Rav Palm didn't know Shas and Poskim. Of course, he did know Shas and Poskim. But sitting by Rav Palm for a year, he wasn't such a tremendous machadish in things he said. But he had, my father used to say, a hot cup. He's a very straight-thinking person. So if you look at the Sefer they published, he didn't publish it, but they published it while he was alive on Rav Palm. I forget the name of the Sefer. I think I have it here. Atorah Lamelech. So if you look, this stuff there is not, it's not earth-shattering. but you see, it's very logical and very yashristic. He really was something special, and I think his kids are very much like that. So, I guess somehow
Rav Avishai David at Beis Tefillah always talks about when he was a youngster, his daddy made him take the train and he would go listen to the shmoozin of Rav Pam. He
oh,
always goes
really?
from the shmoozin of Rav Pam.
Right, right. So I didn't know that he actually. I also used to go to Shmuzin over Palm. Um, um, I went to him. I learned through Masech Sukkah with him. The Chaim Berlin didn't know; they wouldn't have let me go. But I used to take the bus from Chaim Berlin down Coney Island Avenue to Torvadas at night, and Rav Pam gave a share at night. I learned through all of Masech Sukkah with him in that year. Um, and then he used to give, like in the middle, he sometimes, or at the end, he gave a shmooze or something, but he was unbelievable. I mean, it was just, as a human being, I don't know, I never read the biography. I think my father had the biography in the house, someone gave it him as a present. So I read a couple of pages, but I think it's mostly about him as a mechanich. But he was really in every area of Torah. He was in Musar, in Halacha, and everything. Um, and he used to make the kugel for Shabbos on Friday.
Really?
How do I know that? How do
Yeah.
I know? Now they say he wanted to be Makayim because in the Gemara and Shulchan Aruch it's brought that even Gedolei Yisrael like Tanoim Amoraim, I think Amoraim it says there in the Gemara and Shabbos, they would do things for Shabbos. So Rapam wanted to make the kugel for Shabbos. So it's probably true that Rav Pam made the kugel for Shabbos for that reason, but the reason why he made the kugel is because his wife taught on Friday. She taught in public school. Okay, she was a public school teacher. Else they couldn't make a living because, of course, Torvadas didn't pay you enough money for a living. So she taught in public school across the street from my house. So she used to come in. There was no cell phone, so she used to come in to make phone calls during recess. So when she came in, she always used to call Rav Pam and say, Avram, is the kugel ready? So we knew that Rav Pam was making the kugel, right? But there's no question that Rav Pam, while he was making the kugel, he was thinking of learning or had a sefer open as he was doing it. He was a person that didn't waste any time. He was an Anav Yisod. He was such an Anav that when he became the Rashiv of Tarvadas, he refused to put on a kapata. It was unprecedented. In other words, Rabbi Yaakov had a kapata, and before Rabbi Shlomo Hyman had, or from Reuven Gruzovsky, and then of course Rebbe Chazan. Rebbe Chazan only wore the kapata during the week, not on Shabbos, because he said it's my working clothes, so I wear it during the week. I'm the Rashiva of the yeshivas, I have to wear it. But on Shabbos he didn't work, so he didn't wear the kapata. The opposite of everybody else, he did. But Rav Pam refused to put on a kapata. Again, I never asked him about it, but it was clear. He became the head of, and then he became one of the heads of Torah. He still had the same suit that that he wore a suit jacket and he wore a brim down hat. He was just an unav, an unbelievable unav in every sense of the word. And his kids are very much. I knew his kids when I was little. I didn't get to know him over the years, but I know that his kids are very, very fine Talmid Chachamim, and he had and one of his pieces that he had was a piece that was shayach to Divrei Hayomim. So Yosef Kamenetsky got it after he already published the Sefer. So he's going to republish the Sefer. He's going to put a lot of stuff extra that he found in Divrei Hayomim. I found them a couple of pieces as well. So this piece, Reb Yaakov said it about Divrei Hayomim, but he wasn't like learning Divrei Hayomim with the people at the time. Someone asked him a shaila, really a bomb, right? And when you hear it, you'll see it's a real bomb. It's unbelievable. It's a pelatzuma. And Reb Yaakov tried to answer it. At the end of the piece, which Reb Yosef doesn't record here, I saw the piece in the Ksav Yad, like Rabbi Yosef had to work through it because the handwriting is not so easy, but he worked through it. At the end, Rabbi Yaakov says, if this is not the pshat, then I don't know what the pshat is. He said it like, I'm not sure, but if this is not the pshat, I don't know what the pshat is in this. Okay?
Wait a second.
So
this is something that does not appear in Emes Yaakov?
it's not yet in Emes Yaakov. It's hot off
So it
the
was
press.
written. It was somebody's note. It was the notes of
Somebody's
this Rav
notes.
Pam.
Reb Yaakov Kamenetsky rewrote the notes and added the sources, right? And where the note wasn't, like the Hebrew wasn't as good as he wanted it to be, he changed the Hebrew. But the etzem piece is Reb Yaakov's piece that Reb Yaakov said orally. It's an oral piece. It's not a written piece. Okay.
And one of Rav Pam's sons wrote it down.
Yeah, he's a Rav in Toronto.
Uh-huh.
So Rabbi Yosef sent it to me to see if I learned it the same way he learned it, because it wasn't so clear. But I did learn it actually the way he learned it. So it shows that if we both had the same idea, that must be true, because he didn't tell me how he learned it, but I wrote him back when he sent me the piece, right? I wrote him back that, this is what I think. And that's it. Okay. So let's take a look.
What's his first name of this Rav Pam?
This Rav Pam is Reb David. Usher is the youngest. He's probably I would say mid-70s. And Rev David is probably close to 80. And Aaron is probably in his 80s already. Aaron is a Rebbe somewhere in Lakewood. I don't know. Usher, I also don't know where he is, even though I knew him the best because he was closest in age. He was probably, I would say, 4 or 5 years older than me. Anyway,
Sure. And I just want to mention that in Rav Abishai David has a sefer called the glory and splendor of Talmidei Chachamim, with personal stories, chapters about a lot of Gedolim, and he has a whole chapter in Rav Pam there.
Whoa, I got to get a hold of it. I never knew, because now you just told me he knew Rav Pam. I didn't know where he would know Rav Pam from.
I think I have the book you could borrow. I could lend it to you. I think I have it. I'll look.
I would love to see it, because I knew Rav Pam. I mean, I knew him from a distance, but I knew Rav Pam. And my father was very close with him because they lived in the same neighborhood. And as I said, Reb Yaakov really held him for a tremendous machanech. And I think the biography is mostly about his chinuch. He was tremendous machanech. And I want you to know, his wife told me and my mother, because she used to come for the break, for recess, she'd come to the house and we used to schmooze. So his wife said, I asked his wife, is it true that Rav Pam taught elementary school when he first started teaching? So she said, yes, it's true. And he would still be there if Reb Yaakov didn't pluck him out of it. That's what she said. Reb Yaakov told him, you have to teach high school. He was teaching, I think, 6th grade. This is Rav Pam. Right? How many Gdolim start out in 6th grade? Teaching 6th grade. Well, so then Reb Yaakov put him in high school.
Started out even lower.
What?
Your grandfather started out even lower.
So Reb Yaakov, that was out of desperation, right? He was running away from Lithuania because he didn't want to get drafted in World War I. So he came to a town in Poland, because Poland, there was no draft for a Lithuanian. So he came to a town there, and there he taught elementary school. And somebody actually asked him, when he got to Lomzha Yeshiva, the Rosh Yeshiva of Lomzha said to him, how could you teach elementary school? He remembered him from Slobodka. Rabbi Yaakov was considered the best students in Slobodka. How could you teach elementary? So Rabbi Yaakov said, oh, is it better to starve to death? That's what Rabbi Yaakov said. Is it better to starve to death? Right? So Reb Yaakov, I'm not saying he didn't like teaching elementary school, but he started Cheder because he had ideas about how to teach Cheder kids. He used to talk to me about it, talk to other Mechanchim about it. But you're right, because he taught the Cheder, he really, like Wayne said, he really learned how to deal with those young kids and stuff like that. And the famous story is in that town that they wanted, parents came to fire him because he didn't hit the kids. They came to the Rav to fire him because he didn't hit the kids, right? He put the stick that he hit the kids with, he hung it on the ceiling. He hung it on the ceiling so the kids should look up and they should have Yirah Shamayim. They see the stick, but he never used the stick, and the parents complained. Could you imagine today if you use the stick, the parents come up and you get fired? In those days, if you didn't use the stick, the parents complain. What kind of Rebbe is this? My son didn't get hit this week. What's going on? Right? That's when the rabbi said that this fellow that you're complaining about, there's one day he's going to be his picture's going to be hanging in many houses of Bnei Torah. That's what that rabbi said about Reb Yaakov, and it was kachahavi. Eventually people hung his picture up. And anyway, so let's go through the piece. It's a very interesting piece. Reb Yaakov has a chiddush here in Parshanut. Okay, that's why I picked this piece, because it has a chiddush in Parshanut. Hine b'pasuk, what's it? Vayom Shol b'ma'alo asher mo'al v'gam l'shol ba'ov lidrosh. Okay, so in Divrei Hayomim it says that Shaul died because he didn't listen to God, and the Mefarshim learn either it was with Amalek, they didn't kill all of Amalek or the animals, or the first war that he didn't wait for Shmuel. Some people learn it's both. V'gam l'shol ba'ov lidrosh. Okay, here for the first time you see Ezra, right, gives like as a psak halacha that he died the way he died in the hands of the Plishtim because l'shol ba'ov lidrosh, right? In Sefer Shmuel it doesn't say he did anything wrong. It's obvious that he did something wrong because obviously you're not allowed to do this. It's in the Torah, which Rabbi Yaakov is going to point out very clearly. But it doesn't say over there he died because of that. Here, Ezra decides that this was one of the reasons he was killed, is because he did something terrible, which is by the way, it's not the death penalty to ask. The Balas Ov is the death penalty. The one who asks an Ov, the Mishnah says in Sanhedrin, is just over on, not just, but he's over on a lav daraisa. Right? But here it says very clear that for that he got. And don't forget, the Balas Ov already says to Shaul, she doesn't know it's Shaul, but she says to him over there in Sefer Shmuel, right? She says to him, well, don't you know that Shaul removed all cleared out all the Balos Ov from the land, right? You want to get me killed? She says, you want to get me killed? Right? So it's obviously she's doing an Aveira. But here comes Reb Yaakov, and he asks an interesting question. Hine, b'pasuk mefurash ha'isa tefila al shol, al-shol al-melech, sheshol ba'ov. This pasuk says it clearly. In Sefer Shmuel, I said we don't have it clearly. U'be'emes temua, eich shol ha-melech b'chir Hashem over alav shalo tifnu el ovos, El Hayidonim, right? It says in Parshas Kedoshim that one shouldn't turn to the ovos, the ovos, and the Yidonim. Okay, in the Torah there's all different types of the Mechashev, the Yidonim, all the different types, and each one has a meaning, right? There was a lot of different types of magic, so to speak, in those days. V'holach l'shol balas ov. Ayin Shmuel Perek Chav Ches. Okay, in other words, how could Shaul not be over on Bechir Hashem be over on this? Now I don't have this as such a kasha. Why? He was desperate, so he did it. Okay, but the second kasha is a bomb. V'od Yafle, it's a pella. Shenishba Shaul Balas Ov Chai Hashem im yikorech avon b'davar hazeh. She says, you want me to get killed? He swears to her b'Hashem, right? Im yikarech avon b'davar hazeh. If you'll have a sin for doing this, this is already crazy that Shaul is swearing to her that you won't have a sin. V'arei yesh aleh chiyav skila k'deisa b'Sanhedrin balas ov harei b'skil v'anishal, right? Bahem b'azhara, right? The one who asks is b'azhara, means it's a Mishnah in Sechet Sanhedrin that the balasov for conjuring up the person gets skila, and the nishal is b'azhara. So how could it be that he swore to her, im yikorech, if it'll happen to you, avon b'davar hazeh, right? It's mamash a pella, that Shaul swearing by God's name, right? It says, Chai Hashem, right? That already you can't say desperate. To start doing a shvuah sheker, right? That nothing's going to happen to her. So some people learn. The only Rishonim I remember saying, I think it's the Rabbeinu Yeshaya, the Tosfos, they call it the Pirush Harid, Rabbeinu Yeshaya. So he says he promised her that he won't give her, that she won't get an onish. That when it says avon over here, it means an onish, but it's not the pashup shot. Mikorech avon b'davar hazeh means you'll have a sin by doing this, which is a pella. So Reb Yaakov says,
isn't the
yes.
lashon of yikrech very strange though? Like, what's it mean? It won't like mikre. It's a lashon. It's a very strange lashon. They're not saying you won't be over an Ibera. It's like,
let me just see what it says over there. It's in Shmuel chapter Chavches. Okay. So the way the Art Scroll translates it is, one second. Shaul then swore by the name of Hashem, saying, "As Hashem lives, this thing will not be held against you as an iniquity." He learns Yikorech is held against you. So it won't be an Aveira for it. What the word is from which word? Mikre? Mikre, no?
That's what I would have thought.
It won't happen to you a sin, right? Mikre.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what he means over here, right?
Unless it's saying it won't be called, like from the word like karui.
Yikorech, you mean with an aleph and not with a hey?
Yeah, meaning I think that's maybe that's how the Art Scroll might be reading it.
Here, one second. Let me see again. Shows swore, shows not be held against you. I mean, not be called. Let me just see how it's written.
The Metzudah Tzion says,
I'll take a look at what he called. One second. Let's take a look at I have it here. Take a look how the Das Mikra learns it. If he goes through the grammar of it, hold on one second.
says Lashon Mikra.
Who says?
Metzudos Tzion.
Oh, says Lashon Mikra.
Yeah.
So he learns it as happening. Hold on one second. Let's see how he learns it. He doesn't actually go into it. But you say the Metzudos Tzion says from Lashon Mikra, right?
Yeah.
But the Das Mikra does say, like I said, that he promises she won't get an onish. But the Pashup shot is it won't be a sin. And that's the way the Metzudah, the what do you call it? The Art Scroll learns it. Okay, but in any event, Reb Yaakov, no matter how you cut it, right? It's a pella that Shaul would make such a shvua. Okay, he could make her a shvua that he won't tell on her, she won't get killed, right? But to make a shvua that she's not doing an aveira, that's the way Reb Yaakov seemed to have learned it. Okay, so he says like this: K'dei l'taretz hitnagut hatemua shel Shaul hamelach ulayaf shaloma. Maybe you could say this: Shehine haTorah menamekes iser zeh lifnos el ov el yidoni beparsha shoftim in dvarim lo yimotze b'cha ma'avir beno bito be'esh kosem ksamim monein menachesh mechashev v'chover chover v'shol ov yidoni v'dorish el amesim. So in dvarim it says like this. It goes through all kosem, ma'onein, menachesh, mechashev, chover chover. All these the Gemara discusses what they exactly Shol Ov. There's the Shol Ov, the Yidoni, V'dorish El Amesim, Ki Agoyim Ha'ela Sherata Yoreshosam El Ma'oninim El Ksomim, El Kosmim, El Ma'onim El Kosmim Yishma'u, V'ata Lochein Nosein L'cha, Nosan L'cha Hashem Elokecha. And you, not like this God gave you. In other words, the goyim that you're inheriting, they listen to these people. But you right? God didn't give this to you. Navi mikir b'cha me'achecha kamoni yakim Hashem Elokecha Elov Tishmo. Are you getting a sound for an alarm?
No, not in Beit Shemesh, not yet.
Okay, not yet. Okay, so let me just turn that off.
When receiving an alert, enter the protected space until further notice.
Okay. Anyway, so what is Reb Yaakov doing over? He's quoting the pasuk in Devarim, right? And the pasuk in Devarim says you have another option. Navi mikir b'cha me'achecha koni yakim l'cha Hashem Elokecha. Listen to him, right? So what does it say? Don't listen to the Onanim, Samim, right? Like the nations around you, because Ata lo kain nasan l'cha Hashem Elokecha. Navi mikir b'cha kamoni yakim elav tishmon, right? You have a Navi you could turn to. All right. So what does Reb Yaakov say? Let's take a look at the Parshanut here. Hareisha Torah menamekish ein lifnos el kol minei kishufim uksamim ladas hasidos ka'akadosh baruch hu nosel la'am Yisrael navi she'efshar l'shol oso. Kolomar yesh breira acheres mehechel lekabel ma'aneh umemela ein lizdakek l'kochas halalu. So Reb Yaakov says, if you're medayik from the Parshanut, the reason why I don't want you to ask, because you have another option. Certainly, this parsha is not talking about a individual. Why? He says because this parsha, right, is a person who's an individual, ish prati. You can't just go to a Navi and say, what is my future? Right? It has to be something that's very negate to the klal. He can't turn the individual guy who wants to know what his future is about, can't turn to the Urim V'Tumim. Sharei, the Gemara says in Yoma, the Mishnah actually, right? You only ask in the Urim V'Tumim for a melech, for a bezdin, or someone that the tzibur needs. Imkein lahedyet shebe'emes ein lo breira lemi lefnos ein animu kazeh nogea lo. To the individual, the regular person that doesn't have a choice, lemi lefnos ein animu kazeh nogea. It's not. Ubavade she'isser shel lo tifnu el avos vel yidonim nema klapa b'chol ofen mikra. The pasuk in Vayikra, right there, it doesn't give the nimuk. It just says what? It just says lo tifnu el avos vel yidonim. Right? That's all it says. It doesn't say because you have another option. Why? Because in Vayikra we're talking about the individual. And he can't turn there. He can't go there because he's not allowed to. With a melech in Sefer Devarim, he could go to a Navi, therefore he doesn't have to do this. So the way Shaul learned the pasuk here, right? Melech. What question?
Excuse me, but Shaul was a melech when he went to the Ov, right?
Right. So his parsha's in Devarim.
So he could have gone to the Urim V'Tumim.
No, he could. The Gemara says the Urim V'Tumim didn't answer him because he killed Novir HaKohanim. Right?
Well, and because he did that, he lost. Because he did that, the Urim V'Tumim wouldn't have worked.
Not the Gemara. It says it. I'm pretty sure it says it in the pasuk. Here, let's just check the pasuk. Right? In the pasuk, it says like this, Wayne. Let me just check to make sure I got it right. Here. Vayishal Shol b'Hashem v'lo anahu Hashem. In chapter Chavches pasuk Vav. Gam b'chalomos, gam b'urim, gam b'neviim.
He tried.
He tried, exactly. And the Gemara is the one that says, why didn't the Urim answer him? Didn't answer because he killed the Novir the Kohanim in Nov. So it didn't answer him. But clearly in the text, it says that he tried your act. He tried what you say. So Reb Yaakov says over here, Ula Melech, Eitzel Melech, She'elo Sav, no ghost l'klal atzibur, v'rei omid l'reshusay navi. He has a navi because every Melech had a navi. Now Shaul didn't have a navi at the end because Shmuel died, but it could be that was God's plan. In other words, he shouldn't have a navi anymore because his malchus is coming to an end. The im ein navi harei yochel l'shol et urim v'tumim, like you said. Shetsuvase brura vadois. He would have gotten a clear answer. Harei shanimuk ala isel ishtamish ba'ov ki yesh breira et mi l'shol. Choshav shol hamelch shezeh kovei klapav. V'lachein hisik shemikivin shaboso shah lo hoisa lo breira ki urim v'tumim. Lo amdul so beglal chet shel nov. Oh, he says it. Novir kohanim, Gemara brachos. Savash olav ein isel if nos laminig mechashvos. So Shaul said the pasuk in Devarim where it says you don't ask in Ov in the Ovos because you have a navi, that implies where you don't have a navi you can. And I want to add, because Rabbi Yosef didn't put this in, that Reb Yaakov has been differentiating between Sefer Vayikra, which has to do with individuals, and Sefer Dvarim. Reb Yaakov said that's the Sefer HaMelech. The Sefer HaMelech is relevant to the Melech Sefer Dvarim. And Reb Yaakov, we learned that. Reb Yaakov showed it in many, many places, right? So could be over here. The Nimuk is over there. So Shaul said, oh, that Sefer is Negayat HaMelech, and it gives me a Nimuk. Why? Because I have a Navi or a Vituma, but now I don't have it, so I'm allowed. Of course, it was wrong. The question is what he held, right? It's clear he's wrong because Ezra says he died because L'shol ba'ov v'lidrosh. So he was wrong. But Rabbi Yaakov is saying how he learned up the parshanut of the text. That's what he says. And that's why he promised her she won't have an Aveira, because he really thought there's no Aveira.
If it was mutter for him, then it would be mutter for her.
Again, it's a good question. In other words, if he's allowed to ask, right? So he has to ask somebody, right? He's allowed to, we say on Sirius Homer, right? So if you hold the first, if you hold the second minute, like the Litvish minute from Rosh Chodesh till the end, except for Agbo, and they hold the first. So Ramosha, someone asks Ramosha, can I go to the wedding? I keep the second one. So it's for me, Avelis, and I'm going to a wedding. So Moshe says, if they're allowed to make the wedding, you're allowed to dance at the wedding. So could be, if he's allowed to ask, she's allowed to answer, and that's why he promised her she doesn't have an Aveira here. Again, it's a very interesting shot in the parshanut of the text in Dvarim, he learned up the text in the Devarim, and it's a shtickle mashma like that over there, So that's what Reb Yaakov says over here. I didn't ask Reb Yosef about when I learned this up. I thought about the difference between Vayikra and Devarim. Reb Yaakov does mention that the individual is shayach to the psukim in Kedoshim, to the pasuk in Kedoshim. That's what he says, right? Lehedyet. Right? He can't turn to anyone. Right? So Iraq was mashma a little bit, but the Rav Pam did not put in there the difference between Vayikra and Dvarim. So I would put that like in a footnote a little bit, right? But this is what he wrote. It was basically, except for a few words, this was the idea clearly. Rabbi Yosef changed a few words because he obviously, when he was a yeshiva student, maybe his Hebrew wasn't the best, so he just made it a little bit more clear. But this is the piece on this Indian. Once we had this piece on, yes, question.
It's just like according to that shot. So then, why did Shaul dress up and hide the whole thing if he was?
I mean, he should have just come as a melech.
Yeah, if it was mutter for him to do it, and he held that was like the pshat, so he didn't have to do this whole game.
I have a feeling that Reb Yaakov would say that she says to him like this. Hine ata yadata es asher asa Shaul asher achrisa ovos v'didunim min haaretz v'lo matamid nakesh b'nafshi lamiseni. Right? You know that Shaul got rid of this. You know, I have a feeling that Reb Yaakov would say if he came looking at Shaul, right, she wouldn't answer anything to him. She'd be too scared. You know, so that's why he dressed up. Even if Shaul would come to her and say, listen, I have a heter for you this time, I don't think she would have bought it, because she would say, maybe he's tricking me, you know? So it could be that's why he dressed up. Also, you know, he thought maybe it's a little bit of a chil Hashem that he destroyed everything and now he's coming. She's going to think that he's a hypocrite. You know, maybe one of these answers. But Reb Yaakov, I have to check. I didn't check Sefer Shmuel if Reb Yaakov goes into this at all in Sefer Shmuel. I didn't have a chance to check it. I looked in Shmuel, but I see Reb Yaakov Kamenetsky takes me to Divrei Hayamim. So 1 second. I don't know. Maybe Reb Yaakov Kamenetsky knew this piece that we're learning, because in Divrei Hayamim he doesn't bring it, but he tells you in Sefer Shmuel to look in Divrei Hayamim, and I just read it for you. It's a little bit strange. He says, "Vayom Shol I am Asher Kasafti V'Yom Aleph Yud Gimel B'Bir Ketzet Shol HaMelech Shol Ba'ov." So in here in Shmuel, he tells you to look in Divrei Hayamim, which it's not there. It's this piece, but I don't know how he knew the piece. He knew maybe the piece already here, but he didn't see it yet. I don't know. It's a good question. I'll have to ask him about that. But that's the first piece. Because I did this first piece, I wanted to do another piece that Reb Yaakov, you know, there's a big problem today. I have this problem, maybe bigger than everybody else, but everybody thinks about this problem and then dismisses it, right? There's a big problem today with people doing all sorts of things with magical things, right? I'll give you an example: the red string. You know, women wear. I don't know if men also wear, but women, and that's clear. That's clear in the Gemara. In the Tosefta, it's Asa Doraisa. Okay, it's Mamash Asa Doraisa. That thing, but people do it, right? It's considered Darkei Amori. That's one of the cases. The Gemara says the Tosefta says, what is Darkei Amori? It says wearing a red string, right? And there's a whole bunch of things like this that people do. They do it more than Mekayim mitzvos. I mean, they do it better. They do it more mahadrin than Mekayim mitzvos, these types of things. There's many examples of this. I'll give you an example. A mezuzah, right? So if something happens in the apartment, you know, you check the mezuzah, right? You give it to a Kabbalist, right? You check it to make sure it's kosher, and then you give it to a Kabbalist because he knows how to read that mezuzah a different way. Or worse than that is the ksuva. I don't know if you heard about this yet, but this is going on for like 20 years, where I heard a woman who teaches Taras HaMishpacha say to a woman, if your marriage is having a problem, take your ksuva to a Kabbalist, right? That's definitely Darkei Amori. There's no question about it. It's an Issa D'Oraisa, right? And it's anyway shtuyot. It makes no sense. What? It's a document. It's a business document. That's what it is, right? So if it has a mistake in it, you have to rewrite it, of course, because if it has a mistake, it might not be a kosher document. So you have to rewrite it. You have to. There's also halachas of rewriting a ksuva that gets lost, a ksuva that has a problem. Anyway, but the point is that you show it to a sofer, right? You show it to somebody, a rav, right? But you don't show it to a Kabbalist, you know, and he starts telling you. I had one case where the Kabbalist said that I see your names are not matching. So one of you has to change the names to get the Shalom bias, right? So, you know, I remember having a student that got engaged to a guy, and her friend convinced her to go to a Kabbalist to see if the names fit. So she went to the Kabbalist, and he says, you have to break it off. Kabbalist in Makar Baruch. I don't know who he was, but he was well known in those days. And he said, you have to break it off. So she comes back to me crying. She's, she really loves the guy and he loves her. And now she has to break it off. So I said, who told you to go? So she said, my friend told me to go. So your friend told you to go, so you go? That's why, because your friend told you to go. So I said, just ignore it. And then if the marriage went bad, I'd be in trouble, So they're married 30 years already, okay? And everything's going well, right? The Kabbalist told them that they told to change the name, he told them to break it off, right? All this is Mamash Darkei Amori. There's no question about it.
What about the molten lead stuff for the Ayin Hara?
But Ayin Hara. So again, I don't know over there, if this is if this has a Masorah to it. I don't know if it has a Masorah to it or not. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But it could be, you're right. It could be. I think, Daniel, every time we hear things like this, we think for a second, wait a minute, is this mutter? And then we put it to the side, because all the people do it. So we put it to the side. The problem is when you start believing it. I'll give you an example. I heard from a Herschel Schechter once. We were talking about these in Yonim. And I heard from Herschel Schechter, he said, they have a minute that the guy under the chuppah unties everything. He opens his belt, he unties his tie, right? He has no, what? You've heard this, correct?
That, yeah.
So, so Rav Soloveitchik, he asked Rav Soloveitchik, if you should do it. He says it's Darkei Amori. It's not. It's also to do. So he says, my mother-in-law won't let me get married to my wife. My mother won't let me get married to my wife if I don't do it. She's believes in it 100%, and there's something terrible is going to happen in the marriage if I don't do it. So Rav Soloveitchik said to him, okay, do it, but you have to speak out before you do it that there's nothing here. It's just my mother-in-law. That's why you have to speak out. There's absolutely nothing here. And you're doing it because of your mother-in-law. And then we can find a head.
That's probably a good attitude for life. It's probably a good attitude for life with mother-in-laws.
It's good. I don't remember where I heard it, but I recently heard a joke. A guy goes to a doctor. He's not feeling well. And the doctor makes tests and everything. He says, I really have a hard time telling you this, but you only have a week to live. So, well, the guy hears that. He first goes into shock. And then he says, you know what? I think I'm going to invite my mother-in-law for the week. So the doctor says, why? He says, because when my mother-in-law is by my house for a week, it's 2 years. Anyway, the point. But I hear what you're saying, Dave. I hear what you're saying. But the point is, we have a lot of things like this. I heard a guy refuse to. A guy came over to him and said, your wife, I heard, is in the 9th month. You should do psicha in the Aron, right? You do on Shabbos psicha, so your wife will have an easy birth. So the guy said, yeah, I don't have a Kabbalah on such a thing. We never, from what I know, Lithuania, Poland, they didn't do things like this. Okay, so the guy didn't get upset. He said, okay, gave it psicha to somebody else. What's the big deal? Anyway, when the guy's wife gave birth, she had a hard time with the birth, and the father of the girl said, it's because your husband didn't do psicha. That's why you had a hard birth. So his wife went over to the husband because that was the 3rd child. She said, did you do psicha on the first 2? He said, no. He said, my first 2 were really quick births. So, and then I found, I'll tell you what I found. I did some research on this. Maybe, I don't remember if I Googled it or I found it in a sefer, that the Irish in the 9th month leave all the doors of the house open. The Irish Catholics, they leave the house doors open. So now I don't even know if it comes from Judaism, right? If you ask a secular Jew, he'll right away bang on the wood. He'll knock on wood, right? Which if I'm not mistaken, is brought, I think, in the New Testament, or it's knocking on the wood that Jesus was hung on. right? Knock on wood. But I know mamish secular women. I remember as a kid when they would say something like should be bli ayin hara. They didn't say bli ayin hara. They knocked on the wood, right? So all this stuff is definitely also daraisa. There's no question about it, right? So how do you really know? How do you really know what is you're allowed to? Because we have things. I'll give you an example. We have simanim, right? On Rosh Hashanah, right? So on Rosh Hashanah, we do simanim. You dip the apple in the honey. You eat this thing. You eat that. For all these skulas that you have, right? And that's brought in the Gemara. I'll never forget. As a kid, I come from a Lithuanian family. My father was doing it. I was thinking, where are you coming from? You're on a different planet, Daddy. Okay. Then, when I grew up, I saw what's in the Shulchan Aruch, and then I looked up the Gemara. It was in the Gemara, right? So for me, it was like I used to walk around, like we said. I know I can't say anything about this, but I got problems with it. Then I found the Chaya Adam. He was a Litvak, and he couldn't handle it, even though it's a Gemara. So he said the Ikar. He writes. Take a look at in Hilchos Rosh Hashanah. The Chaya Adam writes that the Ikar is the tefillah, we say, not the so why don't we just say a tefillah here? So we should have a Shana of Torah Duka. He says, because like the Ramban writes in Parshas Lech Lecha, that when you have a nevuah and you do a maisa, it has a better chance of coming true. It's going to definitely come true. That's the Ramban, right? Right? He says, Kol, Irin, right? Anything you do after, like the Nevi'im did a Maisa, and then the Nevuah has to come to and call off. So we do a Maisa, but the Iker is not the Maisa. The Iker is the Tefillah. The Maisa is just giving it chizik that it should come true. But it's not, it's like the Ramban says, right? So we do have things like this, and each thing we have to really, in Shulchan Aruch, there's a whole siman on nichush and stuff like this, and it does give cases where it's mutter. I'll give you an example. In Shulchan Aruch, it says, why do you start at Rosh Chodesh? Why do you start at Rosh Chodesh, right? Why do you start at Rosh Chodesh, Nisan, Rosh Chodesh, Elul, to start learning? Because it's a siman tov to start at the beginning of the month. So in Shulchan Aruch, the Ramah brings that. There's things brought in Rabbi Yosef Cairo and the Mechaber. So Reb Yaakov has a discussion on it, right? And I was waiting for Reb Yaakov always to give me a klal. He comes out that the only klal, we'll go through it. Only klal is that if it's in Shulchan Aruch, it's mutter. If it's not in Shulchan Aruch, it's not mutter. So Reb Yaakov didn't really know that, like, to make a conceptual klal, when you do, when you don't. Right? So he said, what's in Shulchan Aruch, because a Litvak would say, like, Tam tiyem Hashem Elokecha. The Ramah writes it in a few places, right? Tam Hashem Elokecha, right? We have, by Havdalah, right? Havdalah, you pour the halacha, and you don't have to do it. It's not a halacha, but in the Shulchan Aruch, it says that you pour the wine over the coast, right? In Shulchan Aruch, it talks more about, is it baltashchis, right? Is it baltashchis? Because we have certain skulot that are like sort of problems with baltashchis. So in Hilchas Dvar Manogim Besuda, in Shulchan Aruch, it's brought over there that for a chasen, they used to put a hose of wine, and the wine used to flow out as a siman tov that they should have sholem and shalva. Right, so the Mishnah Berurah right away says that the tzinor I think it's Rashi actually in Brachos, that the tzinor has to have a place where it's going into something and not going on the floor, because if it's going on the floor, it's baltashchis, right? So by me, I never allowed the wine to go over the cup, because I felt, even though like it's a siman tov to have rachvis and ashirus, right? I felt that you're not allowed to make havdalah. Why? Because when you pour it over, right? You pour it over, so your hands get full of wine. When you pick it up, in other words, you poured it over. You on the cup, you poured in the cup, and you poured it over. Now, when you pick up the cup, there's wine all over. There's wine all over the cup. Who says you're allowed to make kiddush when your hands are dirty with wine? I'm not so sure you're allowed to make havdalah then. So I never did it. My father never did it. Reb Yaakov never did it. right? Even though it's brought in the Mishnah Brura, but the Ramah says you should do it in the middle of at the end of the bracha, break your agafen. But Mishnah Brura says no, you should do it before you start Avdol. He doesn't want to have trouble with the brachas and stuff like that. Anyway, so Reb Yaakov says over here, Baradak Pirush Ma'onanim Amru Chazal. Oh, this is a Micha. Vichratik Shafim Miyadecha Monanim Lo Yeloch. There's going to come a time when I'm gonna destroy the magic from your hands, and ma'onanim lo yilach. They won't be anymore. If I'm not mistaken, the Meshech Chochmah says this is the pasuk that Avodah Zarah is not going to be here anymore, because it talks about Avodah Zarah in these psukim too, and it says this is the source that in the second bias there's not going to be Avodah Zarah anymore. Radak Pirish ma'onanim amrum. Ma'onen zeh ochez asayinayim. The Gemara in Sanhedrin says that ma'onen is ochez asayinayim. Rabbi Akiva Omer zeh machashiv onos v'shots v'omar yom yofel atzeit l'mocha yofel likach. Right? The Tanach says that it's doing like magic that your eyes can't think it's magic because the hand is quicker than the eye. Right? So that's asur. And that's why people say the magician, when he comes to the house, has to show you how he did it. Rabbi Ovadia, I think, Paskins, he has to show you how he did it, because else it's mo'oches etayinayim. Rabbi Akiva says that this is a good day to go outside. This is a good day to buy something, to invest, because a certain day, like Friday the 13th, right? Friday the 13th, if you enact a certain way, because of Friday the 13th, you're over, this is daraisa. There are builders that build floor 12 and then floor 14. A frum builder is not allowed to do that, because it's Yovan, this is daraisa if you machshiv Friday the 13th. Of course, there are days that are for good and bad. Kamo Shivasa Batamas, Shemod Lepronius, O Tesba'ov, Bibchinas Koralai Moed. Right, where it says in Eicha, Shehizmin Yom Zeh Leperonis Bishiluach HaMaraglim. In other words, this was set aside as Yobra when he sent the Maraglim, Bo Churban Bayis Rishon V'Sheni Megalgul Chovalem Chayev. Right, Ulahefech. Right, in Tainus it says Letov Kol Mishanichnas Adar Marben Besimcha. V'Lachein Omer of Papa used to say Hilkach. Bar Yisrael, the Islay Dina Bahadei Nochri, Lishtamit, right? Lishtamit Minei Ba'av, the Rea Mazle, right? Because the Rea Mazle, because your mazel is bad in Av, so get out of having a din Torah with a guy, V'limtze Nafshe, and you should make sure you're around. Ba'adar, there you should have that din Torah. The Bari Mazle, his mazel is good. Kiyomim Shekarubem in Yonim Gedolim Nishar Ke Ledoros. Right? That Reb Yaakov says on Moda, that there are better months and worse months, because things that happen then. Like it says in the Megillah, Im anachnu osim oz hashpana nisheres ledoros. If we do something in those times and it comes out good, there's hashpa ledoros. Right. So, by the way, Reb Yaakov, I remember at a Torah Masorah convention, asked the following question: how could it be that we're counting towards Matan Torah, which is a tremendous simcha, Sfiras Ha'oma, counting on Matan Torah, and right in the middle we have Avelis? If it's a good time, then it can't have Avelis. Reb Yaakov asked that question. They honored him at Torah Masorah convention dinner, and he asked the question. I'm not going to go into now what he answered, but we'll talk about it. When we make up times by ourselves, this is Masugal, this is not. You're over. If you have Friday the 13th, you're over. This is the rice of Lo Sanachashu, Lo Sa'onenu. Onenu is certain times. Okay? Kagon, Omer al Tatchil, Ligvos Mimeni Shachrisu. Motzoi Shabbasu, Motzoi Rosh Chodeshu. Okay? Yoredea, Simin, Kufayin Tes, Sif Gimel. In certain Shulchan Aruch, it's brought. If someone says, I'm going to make my first payment. I can't make it today, right? Don't make it today because it's already Shachris, or it's Motzi Shabbos, or Motzi Rosh Chodesh. So I don't want to give you money now because it's bad luck. He says, Yovan, it's a daraisa, the Shulchan Aruch says. Umasha kosav shom b'sif beis v'ein nosim v'noshim el b'miluy alavana b'vur b'beis Yosef me'tshuvas l'haramban simin reish pei gimel she'ein anichush. If a person says he wants to marry a woman, it says we didn't marry women except when the levana is full, right? So he says there is an Indian like that, but you don't go crazy. Let's say you can't find the hall. You put off the wedding for 6 months because the hall is full on Rosh Chodesh. That's what you do. It's a meshuggah, right? It has a certain simon to it, Reb Yaakov was saying. But of course, Reb Yaakov would tell, if you came to Reb Yaakov, I can't get the beginning of the month or the middle of the month when the moon is full, right? Mila al-Levana, it's full. So I can't get it. So the first time I could get it is 6 months from now. Should I wait there to get married? Reb Yaakov would say, what are you out of your mind? Crazy?
I had that. I went to Rav David Cohen because, right, the Ramah says, I think, it's a segula to get married with a window in the shul or under the stars. Right. So I said the halls we're looking at, none of them have windows, or so he said the kedushin will be chal. Don't worry. And
I'm sure David Cohen would say the same thing about waiting 6 months to get a date where the Milu Levana. Right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't. If I remember correctly, it doesn't say like you have to do this. It's a simon tov, like you said. It's a simon tov to get married under the stars. The Ramah says.
Right. So he said, "Are there windows?" He said, "Are there windows in the shul?" I said, "Yeah, there's windows all over." So he said, "You only need one window."
Right. The window of opportunity. El Kishem Shemoshchem Melachim Ala Mayan. The Ramban says. It says in the Gemara, Yemoshech a melech on a spring of water, Timshach Malchusay, Kain Osu B'milu V'lo Chesaron, V'simona Tovahu, K'derech Shemoshchen Yayim B'tzinorot, L'fnei Chatanim. The Ramban says it's okay to do that. V'aklalhu shekedei shadova yechoshev l'simen tov tzorch she'eh kosu b'shulchan aruch. That's Reb Yaakov's klal. It has to be in Shulchan Aruch. It's not that you can't make up your own things. So when the Kabbalist says, bring me the Ksuva, immediately he's over on Lo Senachashu V'lo. By the way, Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky brings the Sefer Hasidim, says, don't wait for Rosh Chodesh to start learning or to do a mitzvah because maybe you'll die and you miss the blot of Gemara and you miss doing the mitzvah. Rather, the Gemara says, "Mitzvah bol liyotcha al tachmitzenu." Right? Where do we learn it from? From the word matzos, right? Al tikri matzos, ela mitzvos, right? That you should, not the matzah should not become chametz, but the mitzvah should not become chametz. Meaning, if you have a mitzvah to do, mitzvah bol liyotcha al tachmitzenu, right? You shouldn't put it off. That's the Sefer Hasidim says. And he was a Kabbalist, by the way. He was a Kabbalist that said you don't put it off. Anyway, we'll stop here, guys. I think this will be the last week till after, because I'm going to be traveling, hopefully. Right? And so we'll take it up after I get back. Like maybe I might come out before Rosh Chodesh Iyar. We'll have to check. But I'll let you know. Okay.
Thanks a lot, Yeshaka.
Thank you. In a case of there's like a minhag not to travel by air on the 9 days, is there a source for that, or is that also like this?
There's absolutely no source for it. If you can't travel in an airplane on 9 days, you can't drive because it's much worse to drive. In Israel, it's 100 times worse to drive than go on an airplane. So if you don't go on airplanes in 5 days, I think you should not drive. You should just stay home.
But that would also be usher.
But what?
It would also be usher to avoid driving.
Right. The point over here is that people got nervous about the 9 days and they created new things about the 9 days. So there are some people that will say, are you going to Eretz Yisrael? Oh, no problem. If you're going to Eretz Yisrael, you're allowed to go.
Or are you visiting your parents? Or are you going back to America?
No problem. It's a mitzvah, and therefore there's no such thing as that.
That's what I was always told.
Some people will say that, but I never got into it b'chlal.
The yeshivas end this month, like Rosh Chodesh Av. So, like, if you want to go home for your month break, you have to go.
That's the time to go. Yeah, so that's what Stu said. You go to see your parents.
No, but Rabbi Shurin, when I was at Chappelle's and I made a ticket, I didn't know about this concept, so I made a ticket to go back to the States during the 9 days, and I remember I spoke to you, Rabbi Karlinsky, and you're all like, look, you're going to see your parents. It's Kibbutz Avim. It's okay. I got to Ben Gurion. There wasn't one Frum Jew there. I was freaking. And you know what? Today, 9 days, place is packed with Frum people. Nobody, it's just not the way it was.
Right. I mean, a lot of these things are not going to hold eventually because they really have no source, right? And some of them hold very strong, like the red band holds very strong, and every woman that wears it, I tell the women in my school, I don't know if it's good luck or not, but you're over on this daraisa, that I can tell you. Right?
Would you read Rabbi Yaakov's klal of Shulchan Aruch Davka, or if it's in later poskim, or I don't know, how early is Tashlich mentioned?
How old is
Tashlich?
What?
Okay.
Which one?
How old is Tashlich?
Tashlich mentioned. It is mentioned in Shulchan Aruch.
Right. Okay. And then
the Vilna Gaon didn't do it. The Vilna Gaon didn't do it, and it could. I don't remember, but I think some people say because of Darkei Amori, he didn't do it. And the same thing with Kaparis. The Vilna Gaon didn't do Kaparis. So it could be. I think I remember them talking about these two things: the Vilna Gaon held in Darkei Amori. But I have to check. I'll check. I have to let you know. I'll check. But you're right. That's already in Shulchan Aruch. So okay, it's in Shulchan Aruch. So Reb Yaakov says there must be a makar that you're allowed to do it. But Reb Yaakov himself didn't know. He mamish didn't know. It's clear. The minute you say we know because in Shulchan Aruch, that means you don't know the concept. I remember Rav Hershel Schachter saying, he said in a shir, I listened to a shir of him on this topic, I think it was, I don't remember for sure. He said it has to be it has to have some sort of logic in it. If it has absolutely no logic, forget about it. It can't be anything if it's not logical. And I think he mentioned the ksuvas, that they take a ksuva. He says that it's completely illogical, such a thing. Why would the ksuva would it tell you if you have a good marriage or not? What kind of crazy thing is that? Okay, guys, we'll stop here.
Thank you very much.